MP, Jim Allister. Here's his reaction first this morning.
I must say, I think this is a wholly bizarre and untenable position by the council. It's a public body. It's subject, or ought to be, to full public scrutiny. It's making decisions which are capable of being judicially reviewed, and yet it wants to conceal from the public the very basis upon which a decision is made, namely the grounds argued for by anonymous councillors. How can you ever possibly arrive at a position of public accountability and proper access to the potential of judicial review if it's hidden from you what the reasons are, giving rise to a decision that you might want to challenge? I just cannot understand this council and its approach.
Your problem here is that, look, this is about a procedure called a call-in, and yes. I'm not trying to be patronising to the public. Your problem here is a lot of people listening to this programme, they won't know what a call-in is. They won't understand this story.
Well, let's explain it. The council made a democratic decision about the flying of the Union flag at war memorials 365 days a year. A group of councillors believed to be Alliance and SDLP activated what's called a call-in, namely 15% of councillors who disagree with the decision can petition for it to be called in and examined as to whether or not it has an adverse effect, for example, on a section of the community. Now, in making that call-in application...
And that's been around for years. That procedure's been around for years, yes, and is used.
A key part of the procedure is, in making that call-in application, you have to specify what the grounds are whereby you say, for example, it adversely affects part of the community. And this council now is trying to conceal from the public, in other words, to conceal from anyone who might want to legally challenge what has been done, the grounds that were relied upon. That's untenable. It's unthinkable that a public body would behave in such a way and try and pretend that they have legal justification for doing that. You know, the fact that they're trying to hide all this, it just adds to the suspicion that there's something very dubious at the heart of this.
Well, you don't know that there's something dubious, and presumably...
It adds to the suspicion.
Well, it may in your mind. Other people might not be as suspicious. And at the end of the day, this was in response to an FOI request by Jimmy Bryson. We'll hear from him on the programme this morning. And you know what public bodies do. They have specialists and advisors who tell them how to reply to FOIs and what they are within the law required to do and not to do. So clearly the council feel they have legal justification to not release this information.
Well, that will ultimately be determined by the Information Commissioner's Office, and I understand that's where this issue presently is. I would be amazed if the Information Commissioner's Office said that it's okay for a council and publicly elected councillors to hide from those who elected them and the council area that they serve the information upon which they are putting forward in the name of constituents to argue a particular case. I think that's just beyond belief that such a thing would be tenable.
That's definitely not fair, Jim, because what you've done there is you have included the councillors in the decision for this information not to be released. It's not their decision. They haven't taken it. This decision has been made by Ards Council, not the councillors who called this in.
Yes, but Ards Council are the councillors. The councillors can override a decision of the council, and maybe that's what should be done. But so the councillors can't wash their hands of this. They're the people who made this requisition for call-in. They're the people who formulated whatever they are, the alleged grounds for the call-in, and yet those grounds are being concealed from the public. So we'll never know as to the validity or otherwise of those grounds. Now, how could that possibly be tenable in a public scrutiny standpoint or in regard to what is legitimate public information? It just couldn't be.
I'm interested in whether this applies and has applied, this type of decision making, in other councils, in other areas of public life in Northern Ireland. Are you aware of it? And what's the big picture consequences of this?
Well, I'm not aware of this being applied in other councils. I'm not saying it hasn't been, but I'd be surprised if it had. because it does seem to be so fundamental that if you're prepared to make an application, then you should be prepared to indicate what the grounds of that application are. There have been other call-ins. I'm not aware of this ever being concealed before. Maybe it has been, but it certainly hasn't come to my attention before. And if this is the practice, then it's a practice that needs to change. And I would hope that the ICO would step in very strongly to insist that this information under FOI is revealed.
If we look at the specific story here, this was a TUV motion, wasn't it?
It was originally, yes.
Just help us understand what the TUV was trying to do and what happened.
Well, the situation was that the Union flag had been removed from its historic position of flying regularly and at all times from various public buildings. So the motion was to bring it back to war memorials, which of course are the national epitome of the sacrifice of many who fought and died under that flag, and to have the flag fly on at places such as that. It was voted through by a majority, and then, as I recall, a minority, up to 15% of the council body, called in the decision, alleging that it had an adverse effect upon a section of the community. Now, I don't understand, not least given some past judicial judgments, how the flying of the Union flag on a war memorial could have an adverse effect on any section of the community, because under the Belfast Agreement, the national flag, we are part of the United Kingdom, and the Union flag is the flag of the United Kingdom, so it's hard to understand how that would have an adverse effect, not least in an area like Ards and North Down.
And what the mechanism of the call-in is that once, to call something in, you're challenging it. You're saying that, look, this shouldn't happen, despite the fact there's been a majority vote. This should not happen because it has a disproportionate effect on the community. And what that then requires is what percentage, Jim, to essentially overturn that majority vote? What does it need to have?
It only needs, on a call-in, as I recall, any revote requires 80% support in the chamber. I think I'm right about that. So what it really amounts to is the imposition of minority rule on a majority decision. And that seems to be totally incongruous, particularly when it's an issue such as flying the flag on the war memorial, commemorating those who died for that flag in the borough. It seems to me beyond belief that anyone would find that something objectionable and go to the extent of trying to impose a minority on a majority who took a different opinion.
And that is your view, but the story we're doing this morning is, obviously there are people who would disagree with you on that view, but the council is blocking the public from seeing the reasoning of those people.
Absolutely, that is the point, that the argument made is to be concealed from the ratepayers of that borough, that the ratepayers are not to know what those councillors, whoever they are, argued against, what the arguments were that they made, what the arguments were that prevailed, and what the arguments were that should be subject to potential judicial review challenge to see if they're rational, to see if they're sustainable in law. You cannot bring a challenge as to the rationality of a decision if you don't know the basis of the decision.
Jim Allister, thank you very much indeed, sir.